Manhattan, New York. The Plaza. Hotel sweat dripped down Robert Rob Montgomery III's forehead as he frantically searched through the pockets of his Armani tuxedo for the 10th time in 2 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 damned minutes until the most important ceremony of his business career disguised as a wedding, and the $40,000 diamond ring had simply vanished. Mr. Montgomery. The soft voice with a Spanish accent made Rob spin on his heels like a desperate top. There she was, the cleaning lady he barely noticed during the last 3 weeks of frantic preparations at the hotel. Chestnut hair pulled back in a messy bun, impeccable navy blue uniform despite being in the middle of her shift, and honey-colored eyes that seemed to hold secrets he'd never had time to discover. Alice, right? Rob swallowed hard, trying to sound less desperate than he actually was. You haven't seen a ring around here? Small, huge diamond capable of buying an apartment on the Upper East Side? Alice Martinez gripped her broom tightly, feeling the weight of the simple silver ring on her right ring finger. The only inheritance her grandmother had managed to leave her before dying in their small Washington Heights apartment. It was a simple thing, delicate, with a small blue sapphire in the center. Nothing compared to what this man was looking for, but... What kind of ring? She asked, taking a step forward. Rob ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, destroying 3 hours of work by Manhattan's best hairstylist. Platinum, 3-carat diamond, engraved Forever Vivian. It's for my fiancée. She's waiting downstairs with 300 guests and I... His voice failed. 3 years building this strategic marriage with Vivian Ashworth, daughter of Montgomery Corp's biggest investor, and everything would crumble because he had the memory of a goldfish when he was nervous. Alice observed the man she secretly called the Thai Hurricane during the 3 weeks she'd spent cleaning the plaza's executive floors. Always rushing, always yelling into his phone about stocks and acquisitions, always treating everyone around him like invisible furniture. Except, "You remember my name," she said, almost whispering. "What?" Rob stopped searching his pockets and looked at her for the first time. Really looked. "You said Alice, right? You remember my name." For some reason Rob couldn't understand. This seemed more important than finding the ring. Yes. You're always humming while you work. Latin music. It's beautiful." A tiny smile appeared at the corner of Alice's mouth. Downstairs, she could hear the first chords of the organ beginning to play the wedding march. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, removing the simple ring from her finger with trembling hands. "My grandmother always said that angels put the right people in our path at the right moments." Rob looked at the small silver ring as if it were a Tiffany diamond. "Alice, I can't accept this. It's yours." "It's borrowed," she said firmly, extending the ring toward him. "You return it to me after the ceremony." From downstairs came the impatient voice of Vivian Ashworth. "Robert Montgomery, where are you?" Rob took the ring, and when his fingers touched Alice's, something electric passed between them. Something that all the arranged marriages in the world couldn't explain. "Why?" he asked, genuinely confused. Alice smiled, a smile that completely transformed her face, making Rob realize she was, without doubt, the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "Because," she said, "everyone deserves a happy ending, even arrogant CEOs." And then she did something that changed everything. She lightly kissed his cheek, leaving a trail of subtle jasmine perfume, and the sensation that his life had just taken a completely different direction. "Go," she whispered. "Your bride is waiting." Rob ran to the elevator, the ring clutched in his hand, unable to get the honey-colored eyes of a cleaning lady who had just saved him from the biggest embarrassment of his life out of his mind. Downstairs, 300 guests waited. Upstairs, Alice Martinez went back to sweeping the floor, humming a song her grandmother used to sing, a song about destiny, true love, and how sometimes life plays us the most beautiful tricks when we least expect them. Neither of them knew that in the next 7 days that simple ring with a blue sapphire would trigger a series of events that would transform 2 lives forever, and that sometimes borrowed can become eternal. Manhattan, New York, Montgomery Corp Tower. The $40,000 ring sat in its velvet box like an accusation. Rob stared at it from behind his mahogany desk, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, casting rainbow prisms that reminded him of honey-colored eyes and the scent of jasmine. 12 hours. That's how long it had been since he'd married Vivian Ashworth in front of Manhattan's elite, wearing a borrowed ring from a woman whose last name he'd had to check with hotel security. Alice Martinez, 26 years old, originally from El Salvador. 5 years at the Plaza, spotless record. What the security report didn't mention was the way she'd looked at him when she handed over her grandmother's ring, or how her simple, "everyone deserves a happy ending," had haunted him through the entire wedding reception. "Sir?" His assistant Marcus poked his head through the door. "Your wife called. She's at the Cartier store selecting new jewelry for the honeymoon. She wants to know if you prefer sapphires or emeralds." Wife? The word still felt foreign, like an ill-fitting suit. "Tell her whatever makes her happy, Marcus." Marcus hesitated. "She also mentioned you were distracted yesterday, during the ceremony." Rob's hand unconsciously went to his jacket pocket where Alice's ring rested in a small jewelry box. He'd told himself he'd return it today. Professional courtesy. Nothing more. "I need you to clear my schedule for an hour," Rob heard himself saying. "Sir, you have the board meeting at..." "Move it." The Plaza Hotel. Staff quarters. Alice was having the strangest morning of her life. She'd woken up 3 times, each time expecting yesterday to have been a dream. But her finger felt naked without her grandmother's ring, and the memory of Robert Montgomery's surprised expression when she'd kissed his cheek felt too real to be imaginary. She was refilling her cleaning cart when Maria, her closest friend among the hotel staff, cornered her near the service elevators. "Okay, spill," Maria demanded, her Puerto Rican accent thicker when she was excited. "Carmen from catering said she saw you talking to the groom yesterday, the rich one who looks like he stepped off a magazine cover." "It was nothing," Alice said, but her cheeks betrayed her with a flush. "He lost something, I helped him find it." "Girl, please. I've seen you help people before. You don't get that dreamy look when you help Mrs. Patterson find her dentures." "I do not have a dreamy look." "You're humming again. That song your abuela used to sing. You only do that when you're thinking about..." The service elevator dinged, and both women turned. Alice's breath caught in her throat. Robert Montgomery stepped out, looking ridiculously out of place in his $1,000 suit among the hotel's service corridors. He was holding a small velvet box, and his usual confident demeanor seemed nervous. "Mr. Montgomery?" Alice's voice came out smaller than intended. "I came to return this," he said, extending the box toward her. But when she reached for it, he didn't let go immediately. "Alice, yesterday you saved my life. I don't know how to thank you." Maria's eyebrows shot up to her hairline. She nudged Alice and whispered loudly, "This is the guy? Ay, Dios mío, he's even prettier up close." "Maria!" Alice hissed, mortified. Rob actually smiled, not his practiced business smile, but something genuine that transformed his entire face. "I'm Rob, and you must be Alice's friend who thinks I'm pretty." Maria extended her hand with zero shame. "Maria Santos, and honey, pretty doesn't cover it. You're what my daughter would call a whole-ass meal." "Maria." "What? I'm just being honest. Though you're also married now, so we'll keep it respectful." Maria winked at Rob, who looked genuinely amused. "Actually," Rob said, his expression growing more serious, "that's what I wanted to talk to Alice about. Yesterday, what you did. It meant more than just saving me from embarrassment." Alice finally managed to take the box from him, their fingers brushing again. That same electric current, stronger this time. "It was just a ring, Mr. Montgomery." "Rob," he corrected. "And no, it wasn't, it was..." He paused, struggling with words. "When was the last time someone did something kind for me without wanting something in return?" The question hung in the air between them. Alice studied his face, seeing past the perfectly groomed exterior to something vulnerable underneath. Maybe that says more about the people you surround yourself with than about kindness in general, she said softly. Maria cleared her throat. I'm gonna go reorganize some towels. Somewhere very far from here. Take your time. She disappeared around the corner with impressive speed. Rob stepped closer, lowering his voice. Alice, I can't stop thinking about what you said. About everyone deserving a happy ending. You got yours? Alice said, trying to keep her voice steady. You married your fiancé. Happy ending achieved. Did I? The question came out more raw than he'd intended. Yesterday was a business transaction. Strategic merger of two companies. I don't even know Vivian's favorite color. Blue, Alice said without thinking. What? Alice blushed. Sorry, I noticed during the fittings. She always chose blue accessories. Sapphires, navy shoes, blue flowers. It's blue. Rob stared at her. You noticed that in 3 weeks and I didn't notice it in 3 years. The silence stretched between them, filled with implications neither was ready to voice. I should get back to work, Alice said finally, clutching the jewelry box. Alice, wait. Rob's hand caught her arm gently. Would you have coffee with me sometime? Just coffee. I want to know more about the woman who believes in happy endings. Alice looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. The smart thing would be to say no. The safe thing would be to remind him he was married. The right thing would be to walk away. Instead, she heard herself say, There's a cafe on 47th Street. Cafe Luna. Thursday morning, 7 a.m. before my shift. Thursday, Rob repeated, like he was memorizing it. Just coffee, Alice said firmly. Just coffee, he agreed. But as he walked back to the elevator, and Alice watched him go, both of them knew they were lying to themselves. Some kinds of coffee changed everything. Manhattan, New York, Cafe Luna. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of October chill that made Alice question every decision she'd made in the past 48 hours. She sat in the corner booth of Cafe Luna, nursing her second cup of coffee and checking her phone for the 15th time. 7:17 a.m. He wasn't coming. Of course he wasn't coming. What had she expected? That a billionaire CEO would actually show up to have coffee with the hotel cleaning lady? That their moment in the service corridor had been anything more than post-wedding guilt? She was gathering her purse when the bell above the door chimed, and Robert Montgomery walked in like he owned the place. Which, Alice realized with a start, he probably could afford to. But something was different about him. Gone was the perfectly pressed suit, replaced by dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his green eyes look almost gray. His hair was messier, like he'd run his hands through it. He looked human. I'm sorry I'm late, Rob said, sliding into the booth across from her. I had to lose my security detail. Apparently newly married CEOs aren't supposed to have unsupervised coffee dates. This isn't a date, Alice said quickly. Right. Coffee. With the most interesting woman I've met in years. Completely platonic. His smile was teasing, but his eyes were serious. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and graying curls, appeared at their table. What can I get you, honey? Rob opened his mouth, probably to order some complicated business lunch drink, but Alice cut him off. He'll have the house blend black and a guava pastry. Trust me, she added when Rob raised an eyebrow. Coming right up, the waitress said with a knowing smile. You just ordered for me, Rob observed. You looked like you were about to ask for a skinny vanilla latte with oat milk and artificial sweetener. I was. Exactly. You're in a Cuban cafe in Washington Heights, not a Starbucks in Midtown. When in Rome... Rob leaned back, studying her. How did you know I'd never been to a place like this? Alice gestured around the small cafe with its mismatched chairs, hand-painted murals of Havana, and the sound of rapid Spanish from the kitchen. Because places like this don't exist in your world. What do you think my world looks like? The question caught Alice off guard. She'd expected small talk, maybe some awkward conversation about the weather. Not this direct intensity that made her feel like he was actually seeing her. Expensive, she said finally. Clean, predictable. Everything in its place, everyone knowing their role. Rob was quiet for a moment. The waitress returned with his coffee and pastry, and he took a sip of the house blend. His eyebrows shot up. This is better than whatever they serve in your corporate meetings. Significantly. He took another sip, then bit into the guava pastry. Okay, this is incredible. Where has this been all my life? About 20 blocks north of where you usually go. Alice couldn't help but smile at his genuine surprise. You've never been above 96th Street, have you? Is it that obvious? You're sitting like you're waiting for someone to bring you a contract to sign. Rob consciously relaxed his shoulders. Better. Getting there. Alice leaned forward. So why are you here, Rob? Really? The question hung between them like a challenge. Rob set down his cup, his expression growing serious. Because in 3 years of being engaged to Vivian, she never once asked me what I wanted for breakfast, and you knew I'd like this coffee better than anything I've ever ordered. That's not an answer. Because, Rob said, his voice dropping lower, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Saturday. About what you said. About the way you looked at me like I was worth saving. Alice felt her heartbeat quicken. Rob, I know this is complicated. I know I have no right to be here, but Alice, I've been sleepwalking through my life for so long, I forgot what it felt like to be awake. And then you handed me that ring and what? And I woke up. The words hit Alice like a physical force. She'd spent 5 years invisible to men like him, watching them rush past her in hotel corridors, treating her like part of the furniture. Now here he was, looking at her like she held the answers to questions he didn't even know he was asking. You're married, she said softly, as much to remind herself as him. To a woman who's probably at her yoga class right now, planning our honeymoon itinerary without asking what I might want to see. Rob's laugh was bitter. Do you know what Vivian said when I told her I wanted to postpone the honeymoon by a day? She said, Don't be ridiculous, Robert. The reservations are already made. Maybe she's just organized. Maybe. Or maybe she married Montgomery Corporation, not me. Alice wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, using the warmth to steady herself. What do you want me to say? That I'll be your midlife crisis? Your walk on the wild side before you go back to your real life? Rob reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. I want you to tell me, I'm not crazy for thinking that 5 minutes with you feels more real than 3 years with anyone else. The touch sent electricity up Alice's arm. She should pull away. Should remind him about vows and commitments and the fact that she cleaned toilets for a living while he owned buildings. Instead, she turned her hand palm up, letting his fingers trace the lines there. You're not crazy, she whispered. But you're married. I know. And I'm not the kind of woman who breaks up marriages. I know. So what are we doing? Rob's thumb traced circles on her palm. I don't know. But Alice, I'm drowning in a life I never chose, and you're the first breath of air I've had in years. Around them, the cafe hummed with morning energy. An elderly man read his newspaper in Spanish. A young mother fed her toddler pieces of sweet bread. 2 college students argued about philosophy over cortaditos. Real life, messy and complicated and beautiful. This is borrowed time, Alice said finally. What do you mean? This moment, this feeling, it's not really ours. You have a wife and I have a life that doesn't include billionaire CEOs who are having existential crises. Rob's grip on her hand tightened. What if I don't want to give it back? The question scared Alice because she didn't want to give it back either. Rob Montgomery was supposed to be just another rich man in an expensive suit. He wasn't supposed to look at her like she was precious, or remember her name, or sit in a working-class cafe eating guava pastries like they were the best thing he'd ever tasted. Then we're both in trouble, she said. Alice. Her name sounded different in his voice, like something valuable. Have dinner with me. Rob. One dinner. Somewhere public. Completely innocent. I want to know about your grandmother, about El Salvador, about what makes you hum while you work. Alice looked into his green eyes and saw something that terrified her. Genuine interest. Not the polite attention men sometimes gave her before asking for her number, but real curiosity about who she was. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "One dinner," he agreed. But as they sat there, hands intertwined across a scratched cafe table, both of them knew they were making promises they couldn't keep. Borrowed time had a way of becoming something else entirely. Manhattan, New York. Da Silvano Restaurant. Alice had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that her friend Maria had insisted made her look like a goddess, but approachable. Now, sitting across from Rob in one of Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurants, she felt like a fraud wearing costume jewelry to a diamond convention. "You're nervous," Rob observed, signaling the sommelier with the kind of casual authority that came from never having to check prices. "I'm terrified," Alice corrected, watching him order wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "This place has more forks than my entire kitchen." Rob's face softened. "We can go somewhere else. I didn't think—" "No." Alice straightened her shoulders. "I'm not running away. But I reserve the right to use the wrong fork and not apologize for it." "Deal." Rob's smile was genuine, transforming his features from boardroom handsome to something warmer, more dangerous. "Though for what it's worth, I don't know which fork is correct either. I usually just start from the outside and work my way in." "Really?" "Really? Don't tell the Wall Street Journal. They think I have impeccable breeding." Alice laughed despite her nerves. "Your secret's safe with me." The wine arrived, a Barolo that tasted like liquid silk and probably cost more than Alice made in a week. Rob watched her taste it, his green eyes intent on her reaction. "It's good," Alice said, then immediately felt stupid for such an inadequate description. "It's my father's favorite," Rob said. "He has a case delivered every month. I've been drinking it at business dinners since I was 25, and I've never actually tasted it until right now." "What do you mean?" Rob swirled the wine in his glass, studying the deep red color. "I mean, I've been so busy performing the role of Robert Montgomery III that I forgot to actually experience anything. Food, wine, conversation, it was all just part of the script. And now? Now I'm watching you discover a wine that I thought I knew, and I'm realizing I've never really tasted anything in my life." The waiter appeared with menus, and Alice opened hers to find prices that made her dizzy. Rob noticed her expression. "Alice, please, let me—" "I can pay for my own dinner," Alice said firmly, then immediately regretted her tone when hurt flashed across Rob's face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wasn't trying to be condescending, I wanted this to be nice for you." Alice set down her menu, studying the man across from her. 3 days ago, she'd thought of him as just another entitled rich guy. Now she was beginning to see the cracks in that facade, the uncertainty beneath the confidence, the loneliness behind the authority. "Rob," she said gently, "why did you really ask me to dinner?" He was quiet for so long that Alice thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen something worth saving." The words hit Alice like a physical blow. She'd expected charm, maybe some line about her being different from other women. She hadn't expected raw honesty that left him completely vulnerable. "What about Vivian?" Alice asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Rob's laugh was bitter. "Vivian sees Montgomery Corporation with a trust fund attached. She married a business merger, not a person. That's not fair to her." "Isn't it? Do you know what she said on our wedding night?" Rob's voice grew harder. She said, "Well, that's done. Now we can focus on the important things, the foundation board, the Southampton house, getting you into the right clubs." She had a checklist, Alice. Our marriage was literally item number 1 on her social climbing agenda. Alice felt a stab of unexpected sympathy for a woman she'd never met. Maybe that's just how she processes big changes. Some people make lists when they're overwhelmed. Rob stared at her. "You're defending her." "I'm trying to understand her. There's a difference." "Why?" Alice fidgeted with her grandmother's ring, which she'd put back on after Rob returned it. The small blue sapphire caught the restaurant's ambient lighting, looking almost luminous. Because hating her would be easier, Alice admitted. And easy doesn't usually lead anywhere good. Rob reached across the table, his fingers covering hers. You're incredible, you know that? The touch sent familiar electricity through Alice's system, but this time she didn't pull away. I'm practical, it's different. Tell me about your grandmother, Rob said suddenly. The change of subject caught Alice off guard. What? Your grandmother, the one who gave you the ring. You mentioned her before, but I want to know more. Alice looked down at their joined hands. No one ever asked about her family, her history. Men she'd dated had been more interested in her availability than her ancestry. Her name was Elena, Alice said softly. She came here from El Salvador when she was 17, pregnant with my mother, speaking maybe 10 words of English. Alone? Alone. My grandfather died in the Civil War before my mother was born. Abuela Elena worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, watching other people's children during the day, taking in sewing on weekends. Rob's thumb traced circles on her hand, encouraging her to continue. She saved for 15 years to buy a tiny apartment in Washington Heights. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, no air conditioning. But it was hers, you know? The first thing in her life that belonged completely to her. What happened to her? Alice's voice grew thick with emotion. Cancer. 5 years ago. I was with her at the end and she gave me this ring. It had been her mother's, passed down through 3 generations of women who had nothing else to give their daughters except the promise that they were worthy of love. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Rob stared at their intertwined fingers, at the simple silver ring that had started everything between them. That ring saved my life, he said finally. It saved your wedding, Alice corrected. No. Rob's eyes met hers, intense and serious. It saved my life. Alice, I was sleepwalking toward a future that would have killed everything real in me. And then you handed me something that represented 3 generations of women who fought for love, who believed in it even when they had nothing else. Alice felt tears prick her eyes. Rob, I know I have no right to be here with you. I know this is complicated and messy, and probably stupid. But Alice, for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The waiter appeared again, ready to take their order, but neither Rob nor Alice had looked at their menus since the wine arrived. They were too busy drowning in each other's eyes, in the growing realization that whatever was happening between them was bigger than borrowed rings and coffee dates. Should we order? Alice whispered. In a minute, Rob said, his thumb still tracing patterns on her palm. I'm not ready to let go of your hand yet. We're in public. I don't care. Your wife is at a charity gala in the Hamptons, posting Instagram photos of her tablescape. Rob's voice was steady, but Alice could see the pain behind his eyes. Do you know she didn't even notice I wasn't there? Alice's heart broke a little for both of them. For Rob, trapped in a loveless marriage, and for Vivian, married to a man whose heart was clearly somewhere else. This is dangerous, Alice said quietly. I know. We should stop. Before we cross a line we can't uncross. I know. Neither of them moved. Neither of them let go. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with Manhattan's elite having power dinners and closing deals. But in their corner booth, time seemed suspended, held in place by the weight of everything they weren't saying. Finally, Alice spoke. What do you want from me, Rob? The question hung between them like a bridge, one that would change everything if they chose to cross it. Rob's answer came without hesitation. Everything. Manhattan, New York, Central Park, everything. The word echoed in Alice's mind as they walked through Central Park at nearly midnight, the October air crisp enough to see their breath. After Rob's declaration at dinner, they'd barely touched their food, the tension between them so thick it was suffocating. When he'd suggested a walk, Alice knew she should have said no, should have gone home to her small apartment and pretended this whole thing wasn't happening. Instead, she was walking beside a married man through empty park paths, hyper-aware of every time his hand brushed hers. Tell me something I don't know about you, Rob said. breaking the charged silence. That's a dangerous game. I like danger. Recently discovered that about myself. Alice glanced at him sideways. In the moonlight, with his hair slightly mussed from the evening breeze, he looked less like a corporate titan and more like just a man. A complicated, lonely man who'd somehow become the center of her rapidly shifting world. I wanted to be a teacher, she said finally. What happened? Life. My mother got sick right after I graduated high school. Medical bills, rent, basic survival. College became a luxury we couldn't afford. Rob stopped walking. Alice. Don't. She held up a hand. I don't want your pity. I made my choices, and I'm okay with them. But you asked for something you didn't know. They'd reached Bow Bridge, the elegant cast-iron span arching over the lake like something from a fairy tale. Alice leaned against the railing, staring out at the water. What would you have taught? Rob asked, joining her at the railing. Elementary school, 2nd grade, maybe 3rd. I love that age. When kids still think the world is full of magic before anyone tells them to be practical. You still think the world is full of magic. Alice turned to look at him. What makes you say that? Because you gave a stranger your most precious possession to save his wedding to another woman. Because you believe everyone deserves a happy ending. Because you're here with me right now, when any sensible person would have run in the opposite direction. Maybe I'm not sensible. Maybe that's what makes you incredible. The space between them seemed to shrink without either of them moving. Alice could smell his cologne mixed with the October night air, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Rob, she whispered, this is the point of no return. I know. If we cross this line, I know. Your marriage is a business contract that was signed before I met you. His voice was rough, desperate. Alice, I've been dead inside for so long. I forgot what it felt like to want something. To want someone. Alice's heart hammered against her ribs. I clean hotel rooms for a living. You own buildings. We don't make sense. We make perfect sense. Rob's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. You make me want to be better than I am. You don't need to be better. You need to be honest about who you already are. The kiss was inevitable, had been building since the moment she'd placed her grandmother's ring in his palm. When Rob's lips finally met hers, it was nothing like the polite, calculated kisses Alice had experienced before. This was desperate, hungry, the kind of kiss that reordered your entire understanding of what your body was capable of feeling. Alice's hands fisted in his sweater, pulling him closer, and Rob responded by backing her against the bridge's stone pillar, his body caging her in. The kiss deepened, became something that had nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with months of loneliness, finally finding its match. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. That was, Alice started. A mistake, Rob finished, but he didn't step away. If anything, he pressed closer, his forehead resting against hers. A huge mistake. Alice agreed, but her hands were still tangled in his sweater. We should stop. We should definitely stop. Neither of them moved. The park around them was silent except for distant traffic and the sound of their uneven breathing. Rob's hand was still on her face, his thumb tracing patterns that made Alice's knees weak. Alice, he said, her name a prayer and a curse. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hit her like lightning, beautiful and terrifying and completely devastating. Because she was falling too, had been falling since he'd remembered her name, since he'd looked at her like she was worth seeing. That's the worst possible thing you could say to me right now, she whispered. I know. Because I think I'm falling in love with you too. Rob's smile was brilliant and heartbroken at the same time. What do we do now? Before Alice could answer, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and froze. What is it? Rob asked, noticing her sudden tension. Alice held up the phone so he could see the message from Maria. Girl, you need to see the gossip blogs now. With trembling fingers, Alice opened her browser and searched for Rob's name. The first result made her blood run cold. Montgomery Corp CEO spotted at romantic dinner, but not with his new wife. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Rob and Alice at their corner table at Da Silvano, hands intertwined, gazing at each other with obvious intimacy. "Oh God," Alice breathed. Rob grabbed her phone, his face going pale as he read. "Alice, I'm so sorry. I never thought—" "You never thought what? That people might notice when a billionaire CEO takes the cleaning lady to dinner?" Alice's voice was rising with panic. "That there might be consequences? We can fix this. I'll call my publicist, have them spin it." "Spin it how?" Alice pulled away from him, the warmth of their kiss already a distant memory. "What possible spin makes this okay?" Rob ran his hands through his hair, his composure cracking. "I don't know, but Alice, we can figure this out." "There is no we." Alice's voice echoed across the empty park. "There's you, married to a woman who doesn't deserve this humiliation, and there's me, about to lose my job because I was stupid enough to think fairy tales could happen to girls like me." "Alice, please." "No." Alice backed away from him, tears streaming down her face. "This was borrowed time, remember? And our time is up." She turned and ran, leaving Rob alone on the bridge with the weight of his choices and the sound of her footsteps fading into the night. Behind her, she heard him call her name, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because sometimes, even when magic felt real, reality had sharper teeth. Manhattan, New York, the Plaza Hotel. Alice hadn't slept. She'd spent the night pacing her tiny apartment, watching her phone blow up with missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize and text messages from reporters asking for comment. By 6 a.m., she'd made her decision: face the music head-on. The Plaza's employee entrance buzzed with unusual activity when she arrived for her shift. Hotel security was stationed at every door, and Alice could see news vans lining Fifth Avenue. Her stomach dropped. "Alice!" Maria rushed over the moment she spotted her. "Girl, what have you done?" "Made the biggest mistake of my life," Alice said quietly, tying her hair back into its usual work bun. "The whole hotel's talking about it. Management's been in emergency meetings since 5 a.m. Maria's expression was a mixture of concern and fascination. "That photo. Alice, you look like you're in love with him." Alice's hand stilled on her apron strings. "It doesn't matter how I look. It matters what this costs everyone else." "Ms. Martinez." The stern voice belonged to Patricia Hoffman, the Plaza's general manager, a woman whose ice-cold professionalism had made grown men cry during quarterly reviews. "My office. Now." The walk to Patricia's office felt like a death march. Hotel staff stopped their conversations to stare as Alice passed, their expressions ranging from sympathy to judgment to barely concealed excitement at being witnesses to a real-life scandal. Patricia's office overlooked Central Park, offering a perfect view of Bow Bridge where Alice's life had imploded 12 hours earlier. "Sit," Patricia commanded, not looking up from the stack of newspapers spread across her desk. Every single headline featured some variation of "Hotel Cleaning Lady Steals CEO's Heart" or "From Rags to Romance, the Montgomery Scandal." Alice sat, keeping her spine straight and her hands folded. 23 years I've been managing this hotel," Patricia said finally, her voice deadly calm. 23 years of maintaining the Plaza's reputation as the most discreet, most professional establishment in Manhattan. Do you know what discretion means, Ms. Martinez?" "Yes, ma'am." "Apparently not." Patricia slid a newspaper across the desk. The photo from Da Silvano took up half the front page. "Care to explain why you're holding hands with a married guest in one of Manhattan's most visible restaurants?" Alice stared at the photo, at the way she and Rob were looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. The intimacy captured in that moment was undeniable, beautiful, and completely damaging. "I don't have an excuse," Alice said quietly. "Good. Because there isn't one." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Montgomery's publicist has been calling since dawn, trying to do damage control. His wife's attorney called 30 minutes ago, demanding to know if the Plaza employs women who make a habit of seducing married guests." Each word hit Alice like a physical blow. She'd known there would be consequences, but hearing them laid out so starkly made her feel sick. "Are you firing me?" Alice asked. "I should be. The board certainly wants me to." Patricia studied Alice with sharp eyes. "But I've watched you work for 5 years. You're reliable, honest, and you treat every guest with respect regardless of their status or their tips. Which is why I need to understand. What the hell were you thinking?" Alice looked out the window toward Central Park, toward the bridge where everything had changed. "I was thinking that sometimes good people get trapped in situations that slowly kill their souls," she said finally. "And I was thinking that maybe for once in my life I could be the person who helped someone remember who they really were. Noble. Stupid, but noble." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Ms. Martinez, I'm not going to fire you, but I am going to transfer you. Effective immediately, you'll be working at our property in Queens. Different hotel, different clientele, different life." Alice nodded, relief and disappointment warring in her chest. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There's more." Patricia's voice grew serious again. "Mr. Montgomery is upstairs. Suite 2012. He's requested to speak with you before you leave." Alice's heart stopped. "I can't." "You can and you will, because despite what the gossip blogs are saying, you're both adults who made adult choices, and adults clean up their messes." The Plaza Hotel, Suite 2012. Alice had never been inside one of the Plaza's luxury suites. The opulence was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year. But all she could focus on was Rob, standing by the window overlooking Central Park, still wearing yesterday's clothes like he hadn't been home. "You came," he said without turning around. Patricia said it wasn't optional. Rob turned then, and Alice's breath caught. He looked terrible, hollow-eyed, unshaven, like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Alice, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. We both made choices, Rob." "No." His voice was fierce. "I pursued you. I asked you to coffee, to dinner. I kissed you. This mess is mine to own." Alice walked to the window, deliberately keeping distance between them. "How's Vivian?" Rob's laugh was bitter. Furious, humiliated. Her lawyer's already drawing up separation papers. Despite everything, Alice felt a stab of guilt. "I'm sorry. Are you?" "Because part of me isn't." Rob stepped closer, and Alice could smell his familiar scent mixed with exhaustion and desperation. "Alice, what if this is the push I needed? What if this scandal is the universe telling us to stop fighting what we both feel?" Alice spun around to face him. "Are you insane? Your marriage is imploding. I'm being transferred to Queens to avoid more scandal, and you think this is some kind of romantic gesture from the universe? I think maybe some things are worth fighting for. And I think you're having a nervous breakdown." Alice's voice was sharp with pain and exhaustion. "Rob, this isn't a movie. There's no soundtrack swelling in the background, no guarantee of a happy ending. This is real life, with real consequences for real people. I know that. Do you? Because Vivian didn't deserve to find out about us from a gossip blog. Your employees don't deserve to wonder if their CEO makes a habit of sleeping with the staff. And I don't deserve to be the other woman in some rich man's midlife crisis." The words hung between them like a slap. Rob's face went white. "Is that what you think this is? A midlife crisis?" Alice fought back tears. "I don't know what this is, but I know what it isn't. It isn't sustainable, it isn't fair, and it isn't worth destroying people's lives over. What about our lives? What about what we feel for each other? What we feel doesn't matter." Alice's composure finally cracked. "Don't you understand? I'm nobody, Rob. I'm a hotel cleaning lady from Washington Heights who was stupid enough to think she could have something beautiful with someone like you. But the world doesn't work that way. Fairy tales don't happen to girls like me." "That's not true." "It is true. And the sooner we both accept it, the sooner we can stop pretending this could have ended any other way." Rob stared at her for a long moment, and Alice saw the exact second when he realized she meant it. When he understood that she was choosing to walk away, not because she didn't love him, but because she did. So that's it? His voice was hollow. We just give up? Alice reached into her purse and pulled out her grandmother's ring, the simple silver band with the blue sapphire that had started everything. She set it carefully on the marble coffee table between them. I want you to keep this, she said. Alice, no, it's yours. It belongs to women who believe in love, real love, the kind that builds something instead of tearing it down. Alice's voice broke. Maybe someday you'll find that, with someone who can love you without destroying everything around you. She walked toward the door, each step feeling like it might kill her. Alice, wait. Rob's voice was desperate. I love you. Alice stopped, her hand on the door handle, and closed her eyes against the pain of hearing what she'd wanted to hear at exactly the wrong time. I love you too, she whispered. That's why I'm leaving. And then she was gone, leaving Rob alone in his palace of a hotel suite, with nothing but a borrowed ring and the echo of footsteps that sounded like his heart breaking. 3 months later, Queens, New York, Plaza Queens. Alice had gotten used to the silence. No paparazzi camped outside her new apartment in Astoria. No strangers recognizing her face on the subway. The Plaza Queens was smaller, quieter, filled with business travelers and families rather than Manhattan's elite. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like exile. She was restocking towels on the 8th floor when Maria's text arrived. Turn on Channel 7 News. Now. Alice found an empty guest room and used the remote to flip to the local news. Her heart stopped when she saw the headline, Montgomery Corp CEO announces major corporate restructuring. There he was, Rob standing behind a podium at what looked like a press conference, but he was different, thinner, more serious, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 months ago. After extensive soul-searching, Rob was saying to the room full of reporters, I've decided to step down as CEO of Montgomery Corporation to pursue a different path. Alice's hand flew to her mouth. The remote clattered to the floor. I'll be transitioning my role to my very capable COO, Jennifer Walsh, while I focus on establishing the Elena Martinez Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing educational scholarships for first-generation immigrant students. Alice's legs gave out. She sank onto the hotel room bed, staring at the screen in shock. The foundation is named after a remarkable woman who came to this country with nothing but hope and determination, and who raised a family that embodies everything beautiful about the American dream. She passed away 5 years ago, but her legacy lives on through her granddaughter, who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in stock portfolios, but in the courage to choose love over fear. The camera zoomed in on Rob's face, and Alice could see the pain there, the regret, but also something else. Purpose. I know this comes as a surprise, Rob continued. 3 months ago I thought I knew what success looked like. I was wrong. Success isn't about building an empire. It's about building a life that honors the people who believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. A reporter shouted from the crowd, Mr. Montgomery, is this decision related to your recent divorce and the scandal involving my personal life? Rob cut him off firmly. Is not up for discussion. What I will say is that sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers, and sometimes those teachers sacrifice everything to teach you what really matters. The press conference ended abruptly, with Rob walking away from the podium without taking more questions. Alice sat in the empty hotel room, tears streaming down her face as the news anchor moved on to the weather. Her phone rang. Maria. Did you see? Maria's voice was breathless with excitement. I saw. Alice. He named a foundation after your grandmother. After your grandmother. I know. And did you hear what he said about Maria? I can't. Alice's voice was thick with tears. I can't do this. Why not? The man just gave up $1 billion company to honor your family. If that's not a grand gesture, I don't know what is. It's too late, Alice whispered. Says who? Alice, Amor, some mistakes can be fixed. Some bridges can be rebuilt. After Alice hung up, she sat in the silence of the hotel room, staring at her reflection in the blank TV screen. 3 months ago, she'd walked away from Rob to protect everyone from the scandal. Now he'd walked away from everything to create something beautiful from the wreckage. Manhattan, New York, Montgomery Corp Tower. Rob's corner office had been stripped bare. 20 years of awards, photos, and corporate memorabilia packed into boxes that made his life look smaller than it felt. He was sealing the last box when his assistant Marcus knocked. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." Rob looked up, hope flaring briefly before reality set in. He'd been hoping for 3 months that Alice might appear, might give him a chance to explain, to apologize, to try again. It never happened. "Who is it?" "Vivian." Rob's ex-wife walked into the office like she still owned it, dressed in her signature pearls and Chanel suit. But something was different about her. Softer, less armored. "Hello, Robert." "Vivian." Rob stood, uncertain. They hadn't spoken since the divorce papers were signed 6 weeks ago. "I didn't expect to see me again. I'm sure you didn't." Vivian looked around the empty office. "So it's true. You're really walking away from everything your father built." "I'm walking away from everything my father wanted me to be." Vivian was quiet for a moment, her fingers playing with her wedding rings, or rather, where her wedding rings used to be. "I saw the press conference," she said finally. "Vivian, I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. I deserved honesty." She cut him off, but her voice wasn't angry. "Robert, we were both living a lie. You know it and I know it. We married each other's resumes, not each other." Rob stared at her, seeing his ex-wife clearly for perhaps the first time in their relationship. "I should have called off the wedding," he said quietly. "Yes, you should have. But I should have too." Vivian's smile was sad but genuine. "Do you know what I've been doing since the divorce?" "I have no idea." "Pottery classes." "Can you believe it? Me with my manicured nails, throwing clay pots in a studio in Brooklyn." She laughed. "I'm terrible at it. But Robert, for the first time in my adult life, I'm doing something because I want to, not because it looks good on paper." Rob felt a smile tug at his lips. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying, liberating, real." Vivian walked to the window, looking out at the city. "I came here to say thank you." "For what?" "For loving someone else so completely that you couldn't pretend to love me anymore. For showing me that a marriage without passion isn't a marriage at all. It's just a very expensive business contract." The words hit Rob like a punch to the chest. "Vivian, I'm not finished." She turned back to him. "I also came to tell you that you're an idiot." "Excuse me?" "You gave up $1 billion corporation to honor a woman who taught you about love, but you haven't actually gone to find her and told her that." Rob ran his hands through his hair. "It's complicated." "It's not. You love her. She loves you, and don't try to deny it. I saw that photograph. The way she looked at you." Vivian's voice grew wistful. "I've never had anyone look at me like that. She made it clear that we can't be together. She made it clear that she wouldn't be responsible for destroying your life. There's a difference." Vivian picked up her purse, preparing to leave. "Robert, you spent 20 years being the man you thought you were supposed to be. Maybe it's time to be the man you actually are." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you find her. I hope you fight for her. And I hope she's smart enough to let you." After Vivian left, Rob stood alone in his empty office, her words echoing in his mind. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual energy, but for the first time in months, Rob felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he'd looked at every day for 3 months but never called. Alice Martinez. His finger hovered over her name. Everything he'd done, leaving Montgomery Corp, starting the foundation, walking away from the life that had been crushing his soul, had been for her. To prove that he understood what she'd tried to teach him about what really mattered. But Vivian was right. None of it meant anything if he didn't have the courage to tell Alice how he felt. Rob pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the fourth ring, a familiar voice, cautious and surprised. "Hello? Alice?" Rob said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "It's me." Silence. Then, "I saw the press conference." "Then you know I've been thinking about what you said. About choosing love over fear." "Rob." Her voice was soft, wounded. "What do you want?" "Everything," he said, just like he had at the restaurant 3 months ago. "But this time, I'm not asking you to give up anything for me. This time I'm asking if you'll let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve what you gave me." The silence stretched so long that Rob thought she might have hung up. Finally, "Where are you?" "My office. My empty office." "Stay there." The line went dead. Rob stared at his phone, hope and terror warring in his chest. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When Alice appeared in his doorway, beautiful, nervous, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her hotel uniform, Rob's heart stopped completely. "You named a foundation after my grandmother," she said without preamble. "She deserved to be remembered. You gave up Montgomery Corporation. It was never really mine. I was just keeping it warm for someone who actually wanted it." Alice stepped into the office, looking around at the packed boxes, the empty shelves, the dismantled life. "What happens now?" she asked. Rob walked to her slowly, afraid that if he moved too fast she might disappear. "Now," he said, "I spend every day trying to build something worthy of the woman who taught me what love actually looks like." "Rob." Alice's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Alice Martinez. I love your strength, your kindness, your belief that everyone deserves a happy ending. I love that you saved me from a life that would have killed my soul, even though it cost you everything." "It didn't cost me everything," Alice whispered. "It cost me you." Rob reached for her then, his hands framing her face like she was something precious and fragile. "You never lost me," he said. "You just taught me how to become someone worth finding." 1 year later, Washington Heights, New York, Elena Martinez Community Center. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been an abandoned warehouse and was now a thriving community center, buzzing with the sound of children's laughter and the soft murmur of adult education classes. Alice stood in the main hall, clipboard in hand, watching Rob attempt to help a group of 8-year-olds with their art projects. "Mr. Rob," little Sophia called out, waving a paint-covered hand. "You're doing it wrong." "I am?" Rob looked down at his abstract attempt at finger painting, which bore no resemblance to Sophia's perfect butterfly. "How can finger painting be wrong? It's supposed to look like something." Sophia giggled, and several other children joined in. Alice couldn't help but smile. Rob Montgomery, former billionaire CEO, current foundation director, and the love of her life, was covered head to toe in tempera paint and looking happier than she'd ever seen him. "Alice!" Maria's voice cut through the cheerful chaos as she approached with a clipboard of her own. In the past year, Maria had become the center's operations manager, trading her plaza uniform for the organized chaos of running programs for 300 families. "The reporter from the Times is here for the anniversary interview." "Already?" Alice checked her watch. Time moved differently when you were doing work that mattered. "And there's something else." Maria's expression was sly. "Rob's been acting weird all morning. More weird than usual, I mean." Before Alice could ask what she meant, Rob appeared at her side, somehow having cleaned most of the paint off his hands. "Can I steal you for a minute?" he asked, his green eyes bright with nervous energy. "Rob, the reporter—" "We'll wait, this is important." Alice let him lead her outside to the small garden they'd created behind the building. A peaceful space with benches and flowering trees that the community had helped design and plant. It was Alice's favorite part of the center, a place where she often came to think about her grandmother and how proud Elena would be of what they'd built together. "Sit," Rob said, gesturing to the bench beneath Elena's memorial tree, a blue jacaranda that bloomed every spring in brilliant purple flowers. Alice sat, suspicious of his nervous energy. "What's going on? You're acting strange." I'm always acting strange. You said that's part of my charm? Rob. He took her hands in his, and Alice felt the familiar electric current that still sparked between them every time they touched. A year of being together had only intensified the connection between them, not diminished it. Alice, Rob began, his voice serious. A year ago, you gave me something that saved my life. The ring. We've talked about this. Not the ring. Well, not just the ring. Rob smiled, but Alice could see he was nervous. You gave me hope. You showed me what it looked like to choose love over fear, to believe that people could be better than their circumstances. Alice's heart began to race. There was something in his tone, something in the way he was looking at her. You taught me that home isn't a place or a bank account or a social status, Rob continued. Home is the person who sees you at your worst and chooses to love you anyway. Home is the person who makes you want to be better than you are. Rob, what are you? Home is you, Alice. It's been you since the moment you handed me your grandmother's ring and told me everyone deserves a happy ending. Rob slid off the bench and onto one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Alice's breath caught in her throat. I know this is probably the worst proposal in history, Rob said, his voice shaking slightly. I'm covered in finger paint. We're in a community center garden, and I'm pretty sure there's a reporter inside who's going to want to interview us in 5 minutes. Rob. Alice's eyes filled with tears. But Alice, I don't want to wait another day to ask you this. Rob opened the box, revealing a ring that made Alice gasp. It was her grandmother's ring, the simple silver band with the blue sapphire. But it had been transformed. The original stone was now surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the morning light, and the band had been crafted into something that honored its history while making it entirely new. You kept it, Alice whispered. I could never give it back. It was the first gift you ever gave me, and it taught me everything I needed to know about what love looks like. Rob's voice grew stronger. Alice Martinez, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. You're brilliant, compassionate, stronger than anyone should have to be. And you believe in magic, even when the world tells you to be practical. Tears were streaming down Alice's face now. Will you marry me? Rob asked. Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to build a world that's worthy of your faith and happy endings? For a moment, Alice couldn't speak. She looked at the man kneeling before her. No longer the arrogant CEO she'd met 18 months ago, but someone who had been transformed by love into the person he was always meant to be. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Rob slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and Alice marveled at how perfectly it fit, how right it looked. Then he stood and kissed her, and Alice forgot about reporters and interviews and everything except the feeling of coming home. When they finally broke apart, Alice realized they had an audience. The children from the art class had pressed their faces against the windows, cheering and clapping. Maria was crying and taking photos with her phone. Even the reporter from the Times was watching through the glass with a huge smile. I love you, Alice said against Rob's lips. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible. Even covered in finger paint? Especially covered in finger paint. They sat together on the bench, Alice's head on Rob's shoulder, both of them staring at the ring that had started everything. Your grandmother would have loved this, Rob said quietly. She would have loved you, Alice corrected. She always said the best men are the ones who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty for love. Rob looked at his paint-stained hands and laughed. Mission accomplished. 6 months later. The Elena Martinez Community Center, Main Hall. The wedding was nothing like the society spectacle Rob had endured with Vivian. There were no crystal chandeliers or 100-piece orchestras, no guest list of Manhattan's elite or 5-course meals that cost more than most people's cars. Instead, the main hall of the community center had been transformed with fairy lights and wildflowers, with folding chairs arranged in a circle so that everyone could see everyone else. The guest list was a mix of Alice's family and friends from Washington Heights, Rob's small circle of people who had supported his transformation, and dozens of families from the community center who had become their extended family. Maria served as Alice's maid of honor, resplendent in a deep blue dress that complemented the sapphire in Alice's wedding ring. Marcus, Rob's former assistant who had followed him to the foundation, stood as best man, still slightly bewildered by how dramatically his boss's life had changed. Vivian sat in the third row, elegant as always but genuinely happy, her new boyfriend, a pottery teacher from Brooklyn, holding her hand and whispering something that made her laugh. The sight of his ex-wife's genuine joy filled Rob with gratitude rather than regret. But the most important guest couldn't be there in person. Elena Martinez was represented by her photograph on the memorial table, surrounded by blue flowers and candles, watching over the granddaughter she had raised to believe in love even when the world seemed determined to prove her wrong. Alice walked down the aisle without music, choosing instead to hear the sounds of the community that had become her home. Children giggling, people whispering in Spanish and English, the general hum of life being lived fully and authentically. She wore a simple white dress that she'd found in a vintage shop in Queens, altered by Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaning store down the street. It was nothing like the designer gown she might have worn if she'd married someone from Rob's old world, but it was perfectly her, elegant, understated, and chosen for love rather than display. When she reached Rob, who was wearing a simple black suit and the biggest smile she'd ever seen, he took her hands and whispered, "You look like magic." "You look like home," she whispered back. The ceremony was conducted by Father Miguel from St. Rose of Lima, the church where Alice's grandmother had prayed every Sunday for 30 years. He spoke about love as a choice, about the courage it takes to build a life based on faith rather than fear, and about the way true love transforms not just the people who share it, but everyone around them. When it came time for vows, Rob went first. "Alice," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. 18 months ago, I was a man who had everything and felt nothing. I was successful, wealthy, and completely empty. Then you handed me a borrowed ring and taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be shared. His voice grew stronger as he continued. You showed me that real wealth is measured in the lives we touch, that real success is helping other people achieve their dreams, and that real love isn't about what you can get from someone, but what you can give. Alice was crying now but trying to keep it together for her own vows. You saved my life, Alice Martinez. Not just from a bad marriage or an empty existence, but from the terrible fate of never knowing what it feels like to love someone more than you love yourself. I promise to spend every day for the rest of our lives trying to be the man you saw in me before I saw it in myself. Alice wiped her tears and took a shaky breath. Rob, she began. My grandmother used to tell me that angels put people in our path exactly when we need them. I used to think she was being naive, that the world was too harsh for that kind of magic. But then I met you. She looked out at their gathered friends and family, all of them watching with tears in their eyes. You taught me that fairy tales aren't about perfection, they're about transformation. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your existing life, but about creating a new life together that's bigger and more beautiful than anything you could build alone. Her voice grew stronger. You gave up everything you thought you wanted to build something we both needed. You took a borrowed ring and turned it into a promise. You took my grandmother's dream of a better world and helped me make it real. Alice looked directly into Rob's eyes. I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who we become together. I promise to believe in magic, even when it's hard. And I promise to remind you every day that everyone, including us, deserves a happy ending. When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss that sealed their marriage was met with cheers, applause, and the sound of Sophia from art class yelling, "Now you have to kiss all the time." Later that evening, the reception was held in the community center's garden, with string lights hung between the trees and tables borrowed from every church and community center in the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez from 4B had made the wedding cake, tres leches with blue flowers that matched Alice's ring. The DJ was Maria's cousin who played everything from salsa to Sinatra, creating a soundtrack that perfectly captured the blended world Alice and Rob had created together. As the sun set over Washington Heights, Alice and Rob swayed together on the makeshift dance floor, surrounded by everyone they loved. "No regrets?" Alice asked, her arms around her husband's neck. "About what?" "Giving up the penthouse for a 2-bedroom in Queens. Trading stock portfolios for grant applications. Marrying the cleaning lady instead of the socialite." Rob spun her around, delighting in her laughter. "Alice Montgomery, you are the best decision I ever made." "Alice Montgomery," she repeated, testing the name. "That's going to take some getting used to." "We have time." They danced in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching their friends and family celebrate around them. Maria was teaching Marcus how to salsa. Vivian was deep in conversation with Mrs. Chen about pottery techniques. The children from the center were running around between the tables, high on cake and excitement. "What are you thinking about?" Rob asked. Alice looked up at him, her husband, her partner in every sense of the word. "I'm thinking about my grandmother, about how she came here with nothing but hope and determination, and somehow her granddaughter ended up marrying a prince." "Former CEO," Rob corrected. "Current paint-covered community center director." "Same thing," Alice smiled. "I'm thinking about how she always said that love finds a way, even when it seems impossible." "Smart woman." "The smartest." Alice fingered her wedding ring, the blue sapphire catching the light from the string of bulbs overhead. "I'm thinking about how this ring has been borrowed and returned and transformed, but it never lost its power to bring people together." "What else?" "I'm thinking," Alice said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss her husband, "that this is the most beautiful beginning I've ever seen." As if summoned by her words, Sophia ran up to them, tugging on Alice's dress. "Mrs. Alice, Mr. Rob, come quick. The flower petals are falling like snow." They looked up to see that the evening breeze had caught the jacaranda tree's purple blossoms, sending them swirling through the air like confetti. Around them, their guests tilted their faces up to catch the falling petals, laughing and dancing in nature's celebration. Alice caught a purple blossom in her palm and smiled. Even the trees were celebrating their happy ending. "Something borrowed, something blue, something old, something new," Rob recited, looking at Alice's ring. "And something true," Alice added, looking into the eyes of the man who had proven that sometimes, if you're brave enough to believe in magic, fairy tales really do come true. They danced until the stars came out over Washington Heights, surrounded by love, covered in flower petals, and absolutely certain that this was exactly how all the best love stories were meant to end. With two people who had found their way home to each other, and a community of people who believed in happy endings. The end 5 years later. The Elena Martinez Foundation had grown beyond Alice and Rob's wildest dreams, providing scholarships to over 500 students and operating community centers in 6 neighborhoods across New York. Alice had finally gotten her teaching degree and ran the foundation's educational programs, while Rob had discovered a talent for grant writing and community organizing that surprised everyone, including himself. They still lived in Queens in a house they'd bought together that was big enough for family dinners and small enough to feel like home. The walls were covered with photos from community events, children's artwork, and pictures of Elena Martinez, who watched over everything from her place of honor above the fireplace. On quiet Sunday mornings, they would walk through Central Park, sometimes stopping at Bow Bridge to remember the night that had changed everything. Alice still wore her grandmother's ring, now flanked by a simple wedding band, and Rob still carried the memory of the woman who had taught him what love actually looked like. Maria had married Marcus 2 years earlier, in a ceremony that was even more chaotic and joyful than Alice and Rob's. Vivian had opened a pottery studio in Brooklyn and sent them a beautiful blue vase every Christmas. And Sophia, the little girl from art class, was now 13 and the foundation's youngest volunteer, helping newer kids with their homework and telling everyone who would listen about the day she watched a prince marry a princess, right there in the community center. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ended with something better, happily ever beginning, with each new day bringing fresh opportunities to build something beautiful together. And in Washington Heights, where Elena Martinez had once dreamed of a better world for her granddaughter, that dream lived on in the laughter of children, the success of students, and the love story that had started with a borrowed ring and become something eternal. Because the best fairy tales aren't about finding Prince Charming. They're about finding each other. End.